You know what I like a lot? Animation. Animation, I think, is one of my favorite things of all time, simply because it's not real, therefore it's not confined by the same limits that our human fleshy bodies are. Which is why I get really disappointed when people stigmatize animated projects. People seem to have it stuck in their head that animation is just for kids, and don't get me wrong, animation is made for kids, but in the same way that there are live action projects made for kids as well. And we don't do this with live action stuff. Just because Barney's live action doesn't mean you assume it's made for adults. Granted, no disrespect to Barney, that's my dog. Play if you want. Barney was here for me more than my father. Which is to say, he was there at all. So we acknowledge live action as diverse, marketed at a whole bunch of people through different age ranges, right? So why don't we give that same respect to animation? Why don't we acknowledge that animation is a medium and not a genre? I think it's due to the fact that a lot of animation, at least here in the West, is marketed at children. They're advertised as stories for kids, so even animated shows that can tackle more mature topics are associated with children's media. Even if that same IP is known for being mature in other mediums. Let's look at Batman for a second. Batman in his comics, video games, and movies is taken completely seriously. In these mediums, no one doubts for a second that Batman is a mature character, because he is, most of the time. He's a dark and brooding character troubled by his past, and he uses that pain to enact his vengeance to protect his city. This is the story of Batman, and it works. People are intrigued by him. They give him respect as a character. So here's the question. Does this apply to the animated series? If you're a fan of Batman or comics in general, your answer is of course going to be, of course, it's the same story, just 2D. And they have plenty of projects where they're willing to get more serious, where they're willing to get more graphic. It does the same thing the films can do, arguably better a lot of the time. But the reality is there are plenty of people that are going to say that this Batman is made for kids, simply because he's a cartoon. I am a grown-ass man. What do I look like watching the story of a man that gets in a bat costume to beat up criminals? Instead, I'm going to the movie theater to watch the story of a rich man that gets in a bat costume to beat up criminals and a fucking space alien. I think the best way to break the stigma is to do the same thing they did with comic books, which is to say they began to shy away from avoiding certain topics and weren't afraid to push the boundaries of that medium. Which is why I think we need more shows just like. If you weren't aware of this comic book series or stigmatized animation as just for kids, oh my god, I'm so jealous I wasn't in the same room as you when you first experienced this show. To say this show was a boundary pusher would be an understatement. I have never seen a father and son run a train on an Amazon-produced show before this. Granted, it most definitely was not the train you're thinking of, but that's besides the point. Dog, Invincible is the greatest example of televised clickbait I've ever seen in my entire life. You think it starts out so cliche too. We have Superman, the Justice League, Superboy, the nice nuclear family. We have everything we need for a Saturday cartoon, right? I shit you not. Everything is so normal in this show until the last 4 minutes and 44 seconds. I went back to get that timestamp while recording this video. It is at this exact point to where if you're still convinced that Invincible is a series made for younger kids, it will prove you wrong and not take anything back for the rest of season 1. Omni-Man, which is this show's version of Superman, proceeds to wipe the floor with the entirety of the Justice League in exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds. And they do not hold back on showing any of the gruesome things that would happen if you fought a motherfucker that was one universe's equivalent to fucking Superman. What makes it better is that this is the protagonist's dad, so we have to see him almost every single episode of the first season, as if he didn't do what he just did. And the crazy part is, they got off easy, because Mark, our protagonist of the show, does find out eventually that yeah, his dad is an evil bastard. Problem is, he is nowhere near as strong as his dad, but he is a lot more durable than these motherfuckers, so it's just torture. It's not a fight. I like to imagine this section as just the Space Warrior version of don't embarrass me in front of these white people. And just like how that interaction would go, Mark gets his ass beat around the parking lot, but instead of a parking lot, it's the fucking planet! Knocked his ass straight to the city and used his body as a projectile to destroy said city, knocked him down underground and used his face as a shield against a speeding subway train because Mark and Omni-Man are so durable that a full-on train is like aluminum to them. But not to mention, the train is filled with human passengers who all turn to dust around Mark's body. I have always wondered though from watching this scene if as many people would have died if Mark just stopped flailing his arms and legs. Like, Mark had to have hit a few people just by moving his arms and legs up and down. I think his body count is at least 7. He has to hold that. From there, he threw him to the Himalayas into a mountain. He punched his body, caused an avalanche, let the avalanche fall over him as the avalanche crushed the citizens below.
Dog, y'all couldn't just use the belt?
The next time you hear about an animated project and think, this is made for kids, it just might be. But before you make that call, really think about it, because I think some of the most intriguing stories of all time are told through the animated medium. So I ask you politely, yo, put some fucking respect on animated shit, my nigga.